What if I told you there was one idea that sits beneath so many of the fundamentals we learn as animators, so if you can understand it, you can understand almost any animation idea better. It's the idea that unites the classic Disney animators with MoGraph artists and anime fight scene specialists and whichever evil genius it was that invented this kinetic effect when you scroll on your phone. The idea I'm talking about is called weight, and for animators it doesn't just mean how heavy something is, it means so much more. In fact, in my career as an animator, it's probably the idea that's helped me the most because it helps me stop thinking about animation principles like a list of rules and more like a list of tools that can help me make anything I can imagine. Today, I'll show you the two big ways we can add weight to our work, and I'll show you how we can start using our instincts for weight to create the animation we want to make. They only take a few minutes to understand, and they'll instantly improve how your animation feels. But for all of this to make sense, we need to understand this idea better. What is weight, and why is it so important for animators? In the real world, we've got things like gravity and momentum and friction and whatever it is that stops my hand going through my desk. All of this stuff is figured out automatically because they're the rules of the universe. The challenge we have as animators is that none of this stuff happens automatically in our work. We need to create those effects for our audience. Let's look at this example. If I draw a line, how much does that line weigh? And if I draw 4 lines, how much do those lines weigh? The answer is always going to be nothing, right? But as animators, it's our job to make the audience feel like those lines have weight. Your audience is dying to know what this shape is, how it works. Is it heavy? Is it soft? Is it full of eels? All those feelings are super important and we need to add them. When animators are talking about weight, we're not just talking about how heavy something is, we're talking about bringing some of that physical believability from the real world into our imaginary worlds. Remember when I mentioned scrolling on your phone? That effect didn't happen by accident. The designers knew that if they added some weight to this imaginary space within their app, it would feel better to use. Okay, but how do we actually do this as animators? Well, there are 2 big ways we can add weight to our work. We can do it through the still frames we show our audience, and we can do it through the spacing between those still frames. So the way things look and the way things move. Let's look at the still frames first. So I have this circle here. It's kind of the simplest shape I could think of, and it doesn't really have any sense of weight. It's just like a graphic on the computer screen. There's no clues for the audience about how this world is working. But if I put a line underneath it, suddenly this circle has a little bit of weight. Adding that single line makes it feel like this is a ball sitting on a ground plane. But what if I push that further? What if I bend this line upwards? Now it feels like the ball is kind of interacting with a curved surface, or maybe it's pushing the surface down itself. And what if I take that further? What if I crack the ground around the ball? Now we get a sense of what the ball is made of. It's probably quite hard, and the ground is kind of like crunchy, dry mud. And I don't have to change the ground at all. What if I just squash the ball down a little bit? Now I get a sense that the ball is a bit softer and squishier like bread dough. So these are some really simple ways that I've added weight to a still image. So we've gone from completely weightless circle to something occupying some real space. As an audience, we're constantly looking for clues about weight in a scene, and we're super sensitive to them. And with these clues, the audience gets a sense of what it feels like to be in this world you've created. These are the sort of things we take for granted in the real world all the time. But as animators, we need to be a lot more sensitive to them so that we can add them for our audience. The easiest way to show weight in a scene is to let things interact with each other and show how they look. This works for characters and shapes just the same. This is the exact technique I used with the ball earlier. I just let it interact with the ground. And pay special attention to where things touch each other because the audience is really sensitive to those contact points. But I think the best way to get better at adding weight to your still frames is to study things from real life. For example, what is it about this picture that tells us that this balloon is full of water and not air? Character animators are really encouraged to do life drawing for this reason. Because when you study people in real life, they naturally have a weight, and you can learn how to translate that weight from the real world into your drawings. The more you study this, the more opportunities you'll find to add it in your own animation. So if the first way to add weight to a scene is through the still frames, the second way to add weight is by changing how the scene moves. Let's look at a couple of examples where I start with the exact same circle in a box and give the circle a totally different sense of weight. In this example, I've imagined a helium balloon softly floating upwards and bouncing on the top of the box. Everything feels quite soft and light. And now in this one, I've used quite an exaggerated ball bouncing motion. I haven't changed a single thing about how it looks, just how it moves. Straight away, you get a totally different sense of what this circle is and how it works in each scene. Let's look at this other example. These two circles are moving totally differently. One's moving smoothly and the other's kind of flicking around everywhere. So in the ball that's moving quite smoothly, I've let it speed up slowly and then slow down by getting closer and closer together again. And I've also let it move along nice smooth arcs. These are things that happen really often in the real world, and it's why this motion feels like it has some weight, some believability. The second motion ignores those ideas completely, and as a result, it doesn't feel very natural at all. It feels like a glitching computer graphic more than something you'd see in the real world, so it doesn't really have any weight. Let's look at one more example. I'll put these two balls next to each other. The audience might automatically assume that the large ball is heavier than the small ball. But as an animator, I can change the way that the weight feels just by the movement. So if I move it like this, the audience immediately gets a sense that this is a large light ball and a small heavy ball. Once again, I haven't changed anything about how these look, just how they move and interact with each other, and that's giving us this sense of weight. Have you ever wanted to make something feel really heavy and powerful in your animation? Run something really big into it and leave it unaffected. We don't use ideas like anticipation and overshoot and squash and stretch and arcs and easing because they're rules of animation. We use them because that's how things move in the real world, and things in the real world have weight. The way things move in animation is obviously a huge topic, and you can check out this video if you want to go a little bit deeper. But if you start from the perspective of trying to create some sort of physical believability, that will guide a lot of your decisions. You can see here in this animation that I made for Procreate that by using a combination of how things look in the still frames and the way things are moving, I've created a really powerful sense of physicality and weight to the scene. If you really want to use this combination to its maximum effect, you need one more idea. And luckily, it's something you already have. It's your natural instinct for weight. Like, look at this picture, and look at this picture. You can tell instantly that one of these characters is about to fall off their chair and one of them is balancing. That's that instinct. You didn't need any fancy animation skills to understand that. You could just guess it straight away. It's the same instinct that tells you that this footage is slow motion and that this balloon isn't full of air. This instinct for weight is actually one of the most important tools you have as an animator because you can use it as a guide to tell you whether the weight in your animation is working or not. The challenge with this instinct is it doesn't always tell us the best way to change things if your weight doesn't feel quite right. This is where your animation fundamentals come into play. So in this example, I know that if I want to make this character feel balanced, I need to find the center of gravity and where they're touching the ground and make sure they're perfectly in line. Building a strong connection between your natural instinct for weight and your animation fundamentals is what's going to take your animation to that next level. Mastering weight as an animator is an incredible skill to have. But while you're learning animation, just knowing that weight is the goal of a lot of the ideas you're studying will really help you understand them better. And that's the thing, like weight is a goal, it's not a technique. So you can choose to ignore it entirely. And a lot of great animators do that. But they're doing it intentionally. They're not doing it by accident. So understanding weight as an animator can help you understand any animation style better. I'll be doing a Q&A video on all of this stuff. You can look in the description for some more info on that. And this class was actually originally written for my big animation fundamentals course called Animation Basecamp. So we have a whole chapter of exercises just on this topic. So check out the link for that below and all the other stuff I'm working on at the moment. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time.